Hello everybody, Mannix here. Got a little knife review for you right here, right now. Feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gear videos. Support me on Patreon, link in the description if you wish to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Let's dive right into this. This is on a very exciting, interesting knife from Cold Steel, the Engage. Now this comes in a handful of variations, but this is the 3-inch version with the Tanto blade. They also make this with the clip point with the same blade size, and then they make a 2.5-inch blade size, and then they make the premium version, about triple the price of this one, and it has an S35 V-end blade that is 3.5 inches long. Now this is very exciting because of this new Atlas locking mechanism that just recently came out. It's very similar to Andrew Demko's Shark Lock, who is also the designer of this locking mechanism. It's like the production version of the Shark Lock, very similar. I have a video on how this works, but basically it's a bar that slides underneath this pin right here. There's a dual pin system. It slides underneath the first pin you see on the right here, as well as the second pin on the left, and the top of it overlaps or rides above the pin on the right. And then, like all other locking mechanisms, or generally speaking anyway, the end or the butt of the tang of the blade makes contact with the left pin, so it stops it from over traveling, and it also makes contact with the bar itself underneath. You have this whole sandwich dual pin system, and it's extremely strong side actuating locking mechanisms that we're familiar with that have that fun fidget factor, that are really quick, really snappy, really responsive, very nimble, very light. It's stronger than those, or at least the same strength as those. Cold Steel's done a few tests, and based on the tests I've seen, it's a step above those. And apparently, this locking mechanism also can outstand the Cold Steel Triad Lock, a very tried and true locking mechanism many of are familiar with this day and age. It's been around for over a decade now, and that's already one of the strongest locks in the world. But this one, from what Cold Steel has stated, can hold even more strength than that. But we're going to talk about that later in the video. Basically, it's just a really strong lock. If anything, is at least as strong as the other side actuating locking mechanisms out there. But it's not side actuating, it's on the spine of the handle, and you can do the whole flick the knife open and close without touching the blade, swing-a-majig nonsense that we all love to do. It's actually very functional, it's very quick, very responsive. The space that the blade recesses into is cleared, so you can safely do that. You can also disengage it this way. You can rock it forward, kind of like it's a lock back. On this knife, it's safe to do that as long as your index finger is close enough to the ricasso of the blade right there. However, I don't even recommend you do that. I just recommend you go down here, pinch it down with your index finger, and close it that way. You can get good at it pretty quickly. So it's a single-handed operation locking mechanism, I would argue. It's got a fidget factor, really fast, and it's, again, very strong for what it is. That's what's so cool about that lock. I really, really love it. Absolutely love that locking mechanism. You can see the jimping towards the end of it right there. It's excellent. It's probably my favorite overall locking mechanism to date, until someone comes out with something better. So, funny thing, I tried looking for the specs of this knife, and I can't find a single damn page on the internet that just says the knife's full specs. They all have a lot of misinformation, incorrect weights, incorrect lengths. Some of them don't say the handle length. Even Cold Steel's website is not very helpful. I'm just going to do it myself. So it claims that this is the 3-inch Engage, but I've seen some websites say it's a 3.125-inch blade. Let me just measure it real quick with my janky-ass ruler right here. Yeah, it looks like it's 3 inches. I don't know who the hell was saying 3.125. Maybe they were talking about this section up here. But technically, the length of a blade on any knife is the highest point of the handle and then to the tip. So this does not count by legal terms. The cutting edge itself, however, let's measure that, 2.75-inch cutting edge. We have a nice little distinct choil right there to indicate to us where the cutting edge begins. I like it when knives do that. Thank you, Cold Steel, for doing so. Now the handle, 4.125 inches, which means our overall length would be 7.125 inches. Now this knife is hella lightweight. Let's also measure that. 2.37 ounces. That is insane. Even for a 3-inch blade, it's not a large knife. I would even classify this maybe medium, maybe even medium small. I mean, if you're a lady or if you got smaller hands, this is medium larger, but I would not call this a big knife. At best, it's a medium size folder, arguably medium small, depending on your hand size. I have large size hands for gloves. Just fits my hand just nicely like that. There's a little bit poking out right here. So we have somewhat of a guard, a little area to separate us from the cutting edge. So we have a little bit more room, a little bit more reach. fits my 4 fingers just perfectly like that. I kind of wish I had a little more to grip onto because it is also very slim, very, very slim knife, as you can see. And it looks like the thickness is 0.375 inches. It's thin. It's a very slim, very light, very, very light, under 2.5 ounces for a 3-inch blade. That's very impressive. It's extremely lightweight. It's just what they call an FRN handle. They didn't say it was a Grivex. It's just FRN. Who gives a shit? It's just glass and plastic mixed together like we're used to on basically every plastic looking knife in existence these days. So cool. It's very light. There's no steel liners in there. I like the way it looks. It's not like beautiful or anything, but it's a simple, kind of cool looking, almost military-esque look. I mean, the Tanto has something to do with that. Looks like we have kind of a black wash finish on here. That's really cool. It's one of my favorite finishes for a blade. You also have some function there because it helps prevent rust to an extent. Like the handle shape, it's very simple. Got a very simple choil right here. Everything's nice and rounded around the edges. It's all kind of beveled. Little striation design we have going right here. Just gives it a little something something. I like this lanyard hole right here. There's no backspacer. It's just 2 pieces slapped together, as you can see. Blade steel 4116 SS. If anything, that's slightly better than the 4034 SS. They're both Krupp stainlesses. They're cheap. They perform around the same as 420 HC, which is arguably worse than 8CR13 MOV. Certainly a lot worse than AUS 8. If anything, it performs maybe closer to AUS 6. It gets very, very sharp. Cold Steel does a great job with their cutting edges. They have very good heat treatment. They treat their steels very nicely. But it's objectively, I would just say, that not a good steel. It's very, very cheap. Now, if this was a very, very cheap knife, that's understandable. But unfortunately, this knife's not very cheap right now. It retails at $79.99. But in the aftermarket, it could just be because it's so new. Maybe there's a lot of demand. I saw it only as low as $65, this particular model. So for the amount of knife we're getting here, although I really like the locking mechanism, it's extremely lightweight. It carries very nicely. We'll talk about the pocket clip in a moment. It's a great knife overall for being a very, very strong, lightweight EDC knife. But for $65, no, I'd want something a lot better than 4116, at least AUS 8 at that point, at least. But we got 4116, which Cold Steel's been throwing on a lot of their knives. Not terribly impressed with it. Although it's not a bad blade still. A lot of people poo-poo it and act like it sucks and it's the worst blade still ever. No, it actually, if it's under the right heat treatment, it's razor, razor sharp and holds its edge for an okay amount of time, has okay rust resistance, okay corrosion resistance, yada, yada. Resharpens very easily. Again, it's, if anything, a little bit worse than 8CR13 MOV, if anything, similar to 420 HC, but it is argued, blah, blah, blah. It's a low-end blade steel. It's just like a step above the really, really cheap knives like the M-Techs and stuff. Again, we have a good heat treatment going here, and it's very cheap and affordable to work with and use. But if the knife is not a cheaply priced knife, how can you put a cheap blade steel on there and still jack up the price as if it has something better? That's the only problem I have with this knife, really. Right now, it's just a little expensive. If this were like $40, I'd still think I would want this for like $35. No more than $35. This would be a home run, but it's not. It's closer to $65 right now as of mid-2023. So for the price, I think you can do better. But objectively, it's extremely lightweight, 2.5 ounces, and again, very strong with that locking mechanism. Again, you get that speed, that fidget factor. It's an amazing EDC knife, but that's about where it ends. I don't have anything else great to say about it. I mean, it's completely ambidextrous. We got our dual thumb studs here. They're cylindrical. Perfect. Good job on that. Pocket clip's great. A lot of people love these loop over clips, so there you go. Have no issues with the tension. Cold Steel notoriously has very tight pocket clips. This one is actually perfect tension out of the box. Swappable to the left side. Unfortunately, there's no cutout. There's no recess inside of the handle, so it just kind of sits on top of it, which is more prone to wiggling issues. But if you keep it tight, if you Loctite it, go the extra mile, you won't have any issues there, although that would have been nice if they just added some cutouts in there. But the ergonomics are good. They're not amazing or anything, but they're nice. There is kind of a gap right here. This is how the locking mechanism works, but in the Saber grip, my thumb does not touch it. I wish this was jimped. I don't really care about jimping that much most of the time, but on smaller knives like this, I do kind of like the jimping because it is less likely for the knife to fly out of my hands or for my thumb to slip off. It's not a big deal. It's kind of, I know jimping's kind of a fad. Everybody wants jimping, but on a smaller knife, I like jimping. I like having more to control, especially when the knife's so small. On giant ass, like 6-inch bladed Cold Steels, no, I don't really give a shit about having the jimping on there or not. But on a small knife, that's where it comes more into play. I kind of wish it was right there, but it's not. I like how we have a kind of like an indentation that fits my index finger really nicely. I kind of like this kind of grip. And for EDC knives, I usually do a kind of pinch grip. I don't know what the official name of this is, if there is one, but regardless, I go into this grip a lot, and Tantos are great for that. Opening packages, doing this motion, this little slicing motion we do with our EDC knives a lot. Very fast, flicks out every single time, no wrist movement needed. That locking mechanism kicks ass. It's very small. It's very quick. So very quick, very nimble, very strong as well because of the dual pin system. It's really kick-ass. No real texturing on here other than the striations, which don't really do much. It's slippery, for being so fast and so thin. There's not a whole lot of texturing here. There's not much to hold on to. I feel like in a stressful situation, after using this for a while, I feel like it might just fly out of your hands if you're not trained with it. If you're just an average dude carrying a knife and that stressful situation came up and someone's trying to kill you and you got to defend your life and this is all you had on you, it might just fly out of your hands when you're trying to deploy it quickly because there's just not much texturing right here. And again, it's beveled. So although that's very comfortable and very nice and all, for tactical use, that is suboptimal to say the least. I do really like it. I love that locking mechanism. Currently my favorite locking mechanism to date. Absolutely love the strength combined with the speed. I like how it's ambidextrous. It's spine actuating instead of side actuating. That's really cool. I like the way it looks. It's a nice shape. The ergos are okay. Everything's okay about this knife. It's just the blade still sucks for the price point, and I don't like how it's slippery for being so small. I wish it was really textured. It's not. But I love how it's light. It's so lightweight. And you couldn't possibly have made this knife probably any stronger for this speed and weight. That's what's very impressive about this folder. It's an amazing, super strong, super lightweight EDC knife. But I would not put it in the tactical role. I would not go into combat with this knife. Its price point is not great at the moment. It's a little expensive for the blade steel. If I directly compare this to the Range Boss, same blade steel, triad lock instead of the Atlas lock, but it's considerably longer. It's much, much longer, a lot more textured. This knife currently in the aftermarket, it could possibly just be because there's less demand for it now, about 32 bucks. 65, 32. Same blade steel. Same material, exactly the same materials. I mean, the configuration and length is quite different. We have a triad lock instead of the Atlas lock, but it's arguable. The triad lock's certainly stronger as far as shock resistance goes, and it's more simple than the Atlas lock, but it doesn't have the fidget factor. I can't really safely close this with one hand. You can easily cut yourself if you're not careful right there. This has got the fidget factor and the EDC factor. This has got the strength factor. But it's half the price, and you have the same blade still, and you have an even longer length. So you're getting more material right here for half the price, currently anyway. So, objectively, I'm not really stoked about this knife as far as its price is concerned. But again, if you like the smaller knife anyway, and you're willing to spend the extra money, it's still a good knife. It's a great, amazing EDC knife. But for the price, I think even with the locking mechanism, you can do better. Let me compare this directly to the Spyderco Manix, which is twice the price of this knife right here. So I'm not going to say it's better. But objectively, if you're looking at them without talking about the price, although this knife it only has a slightly longer cutting edge than the Engage. It's a lot more broad, a lot more wide, and it's a little bit heavier. It's around, I think, 2.9 something ounces, just under 3 ounces. This is a little under 2.5, so it's about half an ounce lighter. And the cutting edge is just barely shorter, just barely. It's almost the exact same cutting edge. Almost, a little bit shorter right there, but this knife, though, I do consider good for tactical use because we got the jimping, we got traction, and we have that same speed, too. Even if the cage wall bearing lock is slightly not as strong as the Atlas lock, it's still strong enough. So something like this, I think, flexes into the tactical line of use a little bit better. But it's a lot more expensive, but we have a much better blade still. But again, it's about twice the price, so can you really blame it? I don't know. Really cool knife. I like it. I just wish it was a little bit cheaper, and I wish we had a traction plan on here. Other than that, it's pretty cool. I just wish, this is like 35 bucks or something. There'll be a home run for an EDC knife, but for now, we're just going to have to wait. Hopefully the price drops a little bit, but it's still really, really cool. Great, super lightweight, super strong EDC knife. Not really much else, so that's it. I look forward to what Cold Steel uses their Atlas lock for in the future.